welcome to RealAg Live, everybody. Happy Canadian Agriculture Day out there to everybody out there in the audience. Really appreciate you joining us here today for, I think, a pretty important discussion. We're going to explore the area of ag lobbying. And I was joking on Twitter, it's just not all scotch and dinners. There's real work being done, very, very important work at that. And we're going to learn a lot from actually one of Canada's top 100 lobbyist, as mentioned, or as named by the Hill Times yesterday. So if you have a comment or a question, you want to participate in today's live broadcast, all you have to do is enter your question, your comment in the box, whether you're watching on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. Join in the program, join in the fun, and let's learn together. Let's bring in today's guest. It is, hold on here, I got to do this right. I'm producing at the same time as I'm doing all this. It is Dave Carey of the Canadian Canola Growers Association. Dave, how are you?
Good, Shaun. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Hey, congratulations on being named one of Canada's top 100 lobbyists. Now, that's just not top 100 in agriculture. That's like in the grand scheme of things, all industries, top 100. Congratulations, man.
Thanks, Shaun. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And congratulations to you as well on being named today in the top 50 in ag. That's, I'm in good company, apparently.
Well, hey, I appreciate that very much, Dave. Thank you. Dave, we throw around this word lobbyist. Some call it advocate now, or advocating from a verb standpoint. What is a lobbyist?
Yeah, there's essentially three different kinds. We all do the same thing, whether it's advocating, taking positions forward to policymakers, trying to influence legislation, regulations, outcomes, position whoever your constituents are for success. So the three main streams are, you see the folks on TV, the kind of talking heads, the pundits. Then there's consultant lobbyists that work for the big that work for GR firms that represent clients. So client A today, client B tomorrow on retainer. And then you have the third category, which are in-house lobbyists, which would be what I do, and what other organizations do is we are there day in, day out representing the same organization. So our job is to take canola farmers' policy priorities and sell them in Ottawa, in short.
Yeah, there's a few people that I talk to on a regular basis where it's, okay, what hat are you wearing today? Because, they work for several organizations, right? Well, today I'm representing this organization. And but so this is clearly important. This is an important activity that's happening in Ottawa and some of our provincial capitals. What exactly is lobbying, and who are you talking to?
Yeah, so I guess we're so impacted in agriculture by government legislation and regulations. So essentially what we do is we try to look at from a canola grower standpoint, what are policy positions, what are files where we can help farmers succeed? How can we help with their bottom line? How can we reduce red tape? So because so many things are dictated by legislation and regulations, for example, trade agreements is critical for canola being 90% exported. Regulations around biofuels, regulations around crop protection products and plant breeding innovation and new varieties. And all these are governed by the government. So companies or individuals, we have to abide by those rules, jump through those hoops. So really what it is, communicating to federal government, to policymakers, if something's going to be changed, this is how it should be changed for the betterment. If something is an impediment, this is why, and this is why it should be removed. So who you speak to really depends on the issue. I think for a long time in agriculture, government relations, agriculture lobbying, it was, you're an ag group, go talk to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, maybe the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. These days, there's so many cross-departmental issues that, and really the real power within government is not within Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. It's not within CFIA. It's at Health Canada. It's at Environment and Climate Change and Treasury Board and Finance. So then it's about taking your agriculture issues and bringing them to non-traditional ag stakeholders. They don't view agriculture groups as their core stakeholders. So a lot of it is about education and unpacking rural issues for a largely urban, suburban audience.
Sometimes, whether it's the government in power or some of the opposition parties, do you have to sort of explain to them why you think it's important that you sit down and talk? So, because the first response may be, I don't know why this is important to me or my riding or things like that. Like, do you have to kind of make some of those introductions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole host of things. You can start with, there's canola heavy ridings, whether it's by acreage or there's crush plants there. So they're kind of our natural or
Yeah.
natural MPs to discuss with, or if you have board members that are constituents. All politics being local, and then you kind of triage from there. You look at members of parliament or senators and their roles and responsibilities or official duties. So they might be a member of the agriculture committee or the trade committee. Those are kind of easy to kind of understand why they should be speaking with us. It gets a little bit more nebulous and gray when you get out to, say, health or environment or innovation, because I think there's just the way that the seats are based across Canada. There's if we look at canola, there's 62 seats across the prairies of 338. So 276 members of parliament are not from the prairies, where 20 million acres of canola is grown. So you have to have that little elevator pitch, and usually economic impact is your way to kind of get in the door. And then it's about unpacking it in a way that they do care, despite the fact that they might be an MP in British Columbia or the Maritimes.
Well, you mentioned environment, so let's pick on that one for a second. It's outside of the stream of agriculture, but there's legislation coming out of environment as of late that has a big impact on agriculture. Maybe the clean fuel standard is probably the best example of that, driven by the environment minister, but has big implications for ag. And so you have to get out to that minister and talk and make sure that they fully understand some of the impacts, good or bad.
Yeah, and I think it's you have to know your audience, right? So going in and railing against something where the current federal government they feel they have a mandate when it comes to environment and environmental issues or pricing pollution. So we work within the box we're given, right? And we try to operationalize, within the political realities that are. So we've spent a lot of time as CCGA, as canola, as Team Canola, as member of grain growers. Building those relationships with Environment and Climate Change Canada, because farmers are really original environmentalists, right? And making sure that they understand that regulatory policymaking in a cubicle in Ottawa has to be realistic when dealing with the bulk handling system in Western Canada, right, where we're going 1,500 kilometers to Tidewater just to get our product into export position. So and I think a lot of that is understanding their mandate and not fighting against their we understand what this Minister of Environment and Climate Change wants to accomplish. So if there are concerns, how do we mitigate those concerns? How do we mitigate those? How do we position our farmer constituents in the best possible way that the staff in the minister's office who drive electric vehicles will understand and will appreciate and will pick up the phone? And the clean fuel standard is a regulation we have before us. There's opportunity in biofuels for sure. The price on carbon is another huge one, right? That will disproportionately impact the farm gate, and that's something that we're working collectively. And I think next week there'll be something public about it, about national farm groups working together on this in a collaborative way. But going to this federal government and saying kill the carbon tax, it's a non-starter. We don't want to talk to you. We don't want to meet. So we just have to understand that we're not environment and climate change stakeholders. So we have to figure out their language and how do they do things. They're not the ag minister, right? Their constituents are the environment or, quite frankly, ENGOs, not farm groups.
So are you developing, is it more important to develop a relationship with the minister or the staffers, or is it just both?
It's a combination thereof. I think when you're working at you triage up at a technical level. Like our policy team will work with bureaucrats or regulators at the technical level to kind of build our understanding and confirm that our assumptions are correct. If there's issues, can we work it out at a technical level? And then there's an escalation, right? So if you're working at a technical level, then maybe you go to the director of that division or the director general or assistant deputy minister. Keeping the minister's office in the loop is certainly appreciated, so there's no surprises. But going directly to the minister is often the nuclear option, which can end up alienating you from the bureaucracy, because as soon as you send a letter to the minister, that their relevant department starts writing briefing notes. A whole series of events cascades. So I don't think there's any silver bullet. I'd say where we found the best success is having relationships with ministerial offices. When you meet with the minister, that's sort of the culmination of all that relationship building, all that technical work at the bureaucracy, all those emails, text messages, phone calls, heads up to ministerial staff. But I think the ministerial staff are really the ones that are sitting around the table with that minister. They're the ones that are interacting with the department. So as a former political staffer, they're kind of the unsung heroes, but also the gatekeepers. They're the ones you really have to, because they're going to be the ones giving their boss advice. Do we listen to CCJ or not? Are they valid? Can we trust them? Is the resource that they're giving us correct? Do they have hills to die on? That's the sort of stuff that political staff do.
Super interesting. So you sent me some information on lobbying in 2020, and I find this very interesting. There was a 4.2% increase in registered lobbyists last year, a 45% increase in new registrations. In total, there are 6,388 registered federal lobbyists, and 2020 saw an 80% increase in lobbying over 2019. Wow. Clearly, organizations, industries are deeming this a pretty important activity in today's world.
Yeah, otherwise, so registrations, like speaking of those in-house, the sort of those consultant lobbyists, right, that are taking up new clients during a pandemic where we see billions going out the door for procurement, R&D, support, new initiatives, research. So I think a lot of industries or companies or that didn't have a government relations presence here in Ottawa saw during the pandemic how important it is to have that interface with government. So yeah, it's about 63, almost 6,400 registered lobbyists federally. That doesn't get into provincial lobbying either.
Yeah.
All the provinces. Yeah. I guess the one caveat I'd say is that the big increase over 2019 is that 2019 was an election year, so there's it's always calmer. But if you look at 2018 numbers, it's about a 20% increase, and so 2020 is on record for as long as we've had a commissioner for lobbying is the most registered meetings ever. And if you look at, I think the one group that had the most meetings had just shy of 300, but there's 28,000 meetings. So there's one group had almost 300 meetings of 28,000. The top 10 combined is 2,500 of those. So It just shows you how thin it is and how many voices. And I think, as you said, Ottawa's never been a more crowded space because of the pandemic, but also because of the virtual nature. It's very groups that don't either have a footprint, like we've got a 3-person team here in Ottawa, or you'd fly your board in to Ottawa, stay in hotels, have a reception. Zoom's a low-cost way to interact with government, right? So you're also seeing the fact that from a cost standpoint, there's all these new entrants to Ottawa. Will they stick around? Probably not. I think government relations or lobbying will be one of the first that gets back to normal. We're used to being on the reception circuit, lunches, conferences. That's where a lot of work gets done on the periphery.
Yep, scotch. Don't forget scotch, Dave. Everything lobbying is I make fun of it and joke about that, but that's a part of it is you talked about relationships, and I think that's probably you talk about during COVID times there's a lot more volume in terms of what you can get accomplished from a meeting standpoint, but like if you were starting fresh today and didn't have some of those relationships, it's really hard to create those relationships during a COVID Zoom kind of time period. So you're probably really relying on some of that prior work, pre-COVID, to develop some of those relationships with some of those staffers and ministers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think while the pandemic might have allowed, the virtual nature might have allowed more to engage for a lower cost point, it's disproportionately benefited those who already had a Rolodex in place, right? Because most of what you're trying to do is proactive or mitigate things. Like most of the things that we do a lot often around risk management or making sure government doesn't make a bad decision before it gets to a consultative approach. So I think for those that are new or just starting out, it would be a tough year if you're not in a team or that there's folks that have been around this for a couple more years, because it's so hard to build relationships this way virtually. It's a lot easier to any trouble finding the place, some anecdote about going through the airport type security on the hill. How do you take your coffee? All of those icebreakers. It's like MP so-and-so has entered the Zoom waiting room. So It disproportionately, I think the Hill Times talk about it in their article about the top 100 yesterday, it disproportionately benefited those of us that have been around, because Ottawa is a small town, right? People come and go, but we're still even though there's 6,300 of us, it's still a small group.
So I want to get this straight here, because I kind of am thinking you made an error, but it says CCGA from January through June you did 57 meetings, but in November you did 84. Is that correct?
Yeah,
84 in a month. How the heck did you do that?
Well, November and February tend to be the two sort of busiest months. It's sort of the Parliament before it goes to Christmas when it returns. So that's a combination of divide and conquer between our team. It's also a combination of getting our board involved in the fact that, CCGA, we have multiple strategies for how we engage. We engage as a standalone organization. We do joint advocacy with the Canola Council. We're members of CAFTA. I sit on the board of directors of CAFTA. So we're engaged with CAFTA meetings. We're a member of the Grain Growers of Canada. We participate in all the Grains Week meetings. So I've got a staff of 3 plus our policy team spins off in supports. We got board of directors in various places. November was Grain Growers Grains Week and the CCJ Board of Directors Lobby Week. So culmination of a lot. February was a lot calmer, but we're also, there was a lot on the go at that time. Pre-Gazette one for Clean Fuel Standard around biofuels, be a real big pusher on business risk management leading up to the federal, provincial, territorial meeting of agriculture ministers. So we had a lot of reasons to engage. We weren't just there covering the waterfront. We were there because it was timely. And yeah, I think in total in 2020, we logged 184 meetings, which puts us number 6, regardless of industry. We're up there with mining and petroleum, and Federation of Municipalities, I think, had the most meetings. So it's, November was a busy month.
So a lot of times we talk about ag lobbying, we think about political clout and convincing the government. There's you need to have some political will to hear what our side of the industry is thinking. I think of Dairy Farmers of Canada as an organization that obviously has some of that clout and does a good job as well lobbying. What are some other industries where you look across industry streams and you say, man, they're kind. Is there an industry that's kind of like where they're sort of the gold standard in how to do it and from a lobbying perspective?
Yeah, I think everyone's got different approaches. I think the one thing in agriculture is that and it was reflected to me recently meeting with Senator, was we're one of the only industries where there's so many of us, right? There's a proliferation of groups, right? It'd be like if the auto sector had a light heavy duty truck association and a sports car association. So I
Yeah.
like the analogy. I think those that are consistently up there are Federation of Canadian Municipalities are always up there. The Mining Association of Canada, the Petroleum the Association of Petroleum Producers, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, other ag groups, cattlemen and dairy and egg are consistently there and having their presence known. So I think there's different approaches, and I think what I look at. What I feel works the best, we talk about the genuine relationship building. There are some groups that will hire consultant lobbyists and actually just have those consultant lobbyists go do 30 meetings in a month on their behalf with no staff there because they want to have that presence. For me, I like doing it ourselves. We have a 3-person GR team. We want to be in the meetings. We want to bring our board when appropriate. So I think you take what works well. What is FPAC, the forest products? What are they doing well, and how do you observe? And part of that is we use monitoring services like the Lobby Monitor to find out who's meeting with who. Oh, they just met, this senator or minister met with an agriculture group. Maybe they're amenable to meeting with us. Or a group has met with a various minister or senator who has an opposing view to us. Well, we should probably circle back and chat with that person just to tie things up. So you take the best practices of what you see, and then you try not to repeat the concerns that you have for the issues that you see is not effective. And my team of 3, we're all former political staffers, so we also always reflect what did not work well when we were on the other side of the table.
Yep.
When our bosses were like, let's not meet with that group again. They don't understand that education is a provincial jurisdiction, and yet they're hammering on me about it. So I think between Gail, Julie, and I, our team, it's just we've been on the other side, right? We know what works well, not following up, being late, not saying who's going to come to the meeting, not knowing who's going to speak to what, not understanding their role and what is reasonable for them to do. Those are all things that you just avoid.
Very interesting. We got a question here from Devin. He wants to know, I'm going to move, just hold on one sec. There we go. Are there fringe minority farm groups that directly counter lobby or get traction with government?
There are environmental NGOs that certainly do get traction with government. There are groups that have opposing viewpoints. I find the groups that are those who stick around that aren't there for fundraising purposes, that are there for policy advancement, that are there to do the right things for their constituents, are usually willing to sit down with you. Clean Fuel Standard, a great example. We should sit down with petroleum. We should sit down with fuel. We should have a discussion about how do we work together. Because as I said, Ottawa is a small town, so burning bridges is not a good thing. But there are groups that I'd say do not support modern agriculture, do not support the use of biotechnologies, do not support crop protection products, have issues with export because all things should be local. So there are groups. I'd say that those of us who are focused on being constructive, growing the economy, have legitimate ideas, we tend to win the day. But there's certainly groups that we do bump up that are not supportive of agriculture.
Okay, thanks for the question, Devin. Really do appreciate it. I got a question for you, and you don't need to name names. Okay, I'm not looking for you to. We're not. This isn't a tell-all book we're doing here.
Not yet, eh?
Okay, not yet. We'll get to that yet. But strangest lobbyist experience. Do you have one? One where maybe that was when you're a staffer, even. But do you have kind of like a sort of a strange experience that happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some weird. I mean, one that maybe it's not strange, but I'll try to think of it straight. What bad one was, the guy, consultant lobbyist once was talking to our scheduling assistant, asked to be put through to me, was trying to get us to book a meeting with the MP about one issue on behalf of his clients, and he's like, "Now, while I have you, can I also try to book this other group that is also one of ours? Can I try to get them in as well?" I think, lobbying wise, it's I guess there's one. So like oftentimes there's the sort of same Tuesdays are the best days if you're going to do an in-person lobby day. There's the best day of the week with the parliamentary calendar to do it. Wednesdays is caucus, they're tied up 9 to 12. Then you've got QP Wednesdays are a bust. Thursday, usually vote heavy. Monday, Friday, MPs are going in and out. So Tuesdays tend to be busy, and there's a group, won't name names, but they were going around and meeting with all these MPs and leaving behind something. Not like one of these, leave behind material or whatever, but leaving behind a little gift. And they were bringing all these gifts through, which were perishable goods, and there was serious concerns about that them remaining okay at room temperature for a full day of shuffling in out of buildings, but the second just being, a lot of members of parliament are not comfortable accepting gifts. There's a rule about how that stuff works, but I did certainly, as we were walking through this organization who had a big presence on the Hill that day, a number of members of parliament were taking issue with being given something in the meeting, and that they were seen going through security with bags of sort of gifts. Members of parliament don't like that. That's a big so that was a strange one, just because of the organization. You'd think they'd know better, and that the optics of that just is not good.
Interesting.
And the other one is just the big one is just we have to register every time we meet with the designated public office holder by the 15th of the month. So looking backwards, who we met with, when, what we talked about. And I'll never forget that there was a long time ago, a certain minister stood up in the House and talked about their engagement with the group. And, we meet with a senator, they might say, well, talking to canola growers, XYZ. Well, this minister stood up and talked about their interaction with the lobbyist group, that they're bringing their message forward, to the floor. That lobbyist group never registered the meeting. And as a savvy staffer, probably some 20-year-old kid in short pants, was, digging in for the opposition and noticed that it was never registered. And that group never got in with with that particular minister or the sort of his periphery ever again. So those are a few things that of what not to do. You have to stay on top of your registry, because if someone's speaking publicly about it, the onus is not on the MP or the senator. The onus is on us. So that's
uncomfortable.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah. Okay,
career limiting.
Why do you have to register those conversations and what you talk about? Like, who is that benefiting?
It's a transparency thing. It's so that there's no one exercising undue influence, I suppose. It's just government commitment to openness and transparency. So we have to do it again by the 15th of each month. It can be a little gray as to who qualifies as a designated public office holder, which political staff do, which don't, which department officials do, which don't. And the rules are it's verbal. So it has to be verbal. So because emails are all atypable, right? That's another reason for it is if I send an email to a minister with a letter, if someone wants to file an ATIP, they can. It might take a couple months, but they could drag that information out. but verbally there's no record of it. So if there's no public record of the decision, of the discussion, it has to be filed. And the rule is in person, prearranged, and we have an ask. So if you get a call from minister's office, they're asking to clarify something, you can do that. But if you arrange a meeting with the minister's office staff and you've got something you want from them, that has to be logged by subject matter, by date, and by who is in attendance from the government.
Now, canola is an example where there are some cross-border issues. Can you go lobby in North Dakota or go down to DC and have meetings with politicians there, or do you have to register in the US as well?
Yeah, there's different thresholds for in Canada, for example. It's all up for review right now. Where if you're spending more than 25% of your time in whatever business you are, then you should be registered. I don't know all of the U.S.'s rules specifically. I have in my previous roles been to D.C. and met with congressmen. I didn't because it was a one-off. It's not a part of my everyday business. The bigger thing is understanding provincial rules because if I start spending a bunch of time in a legislature, which I wouldn't because our provincial members do that, then there are rules, and the rules for Alberta are not the same as Saskatchewan or Ontario or Manitoba. So you end up overlaying a lot of different rules to follow. And actually, even though it's a headache, the federal registry is better than the provincial registries as far as it's a government website, right? So imagine having to enter 84 meetings in 1 month. It's a chore.
Yeah. Now, it's Canadian Agriculture Day, so I'm sure one of the topics that's going to come up today in a lot of the events that are happening is you're trying to get people into our industry. Being an ag lobbyist is a job, it's a role, and it's becoming more and more important. If somebody wanted to be an ag lobbyist, what is their path to it, Dave? Like you have your own story and how you ended up where you are at CCGA, but is there a typical path, a typical education background that people have? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'd say that the path of being an ag lobbyist is definitely be harder to unpack than just path to being a lobbyist. But like usually poli-sci degrees, sort of folk, social sciences, law. There's a lot of non-practicing lawyers in our line of work because there's so much involved in reviewing legislation, regulations, and structuring arguments. Very if you like debating, it's a good line of work to be in. I think what a lot of folks do is they end up interning during a campaign, getting a job on the Hill, working on a campaign, and getting dragged to Ottawa as a legislative assistant or whatever it is. I think when people decide that they want to leave politics, a lot of them go into consulting because then they get a taste of everything, so they can kind of decide: do I like mining? Do I like forestry? Do I like agriculture? But if you like agriculture, if you like trade, if you like innovation, then the path would be sort of looking at folks that have a social science background, public affairs inclination. I've worked on the Hill is a kind of a must because it's almost impossible to not a must, but for my team, because it's impossible to explain it unless you've been there sometimes, right? There's so much shorthand and advantage from being in the trenches. For me, it was exposure working as the chair of the International Trade Committee. I was exposed to all these agriculture groups as a city kid, and I was like, well, they're pro trade. I'm a pro trade, pro market guy. They wanted to come and testify on the FTAs we had lined up. They contribute to the economy. They're always in demand. There's no shortage of issues to tackle and to unpack. So I think there is a lot of opportunities here that aren't, right. We're in our office here, there's 6 other national associations based in Ottawa here, and some are farm kids, but a lot aren't. And there's a lot of different opportunities in agriculture, from marketing to accounting to agronomy, dietitian. Advocacy is certainly one of those, and it's also, I think, an industry. Being this Canada Ag Day, you feel good about it, right? It's an easy thing to feel, especially now on the farmer side for the last 13 months representing farmers. It's easy to feel good about it. And it's just sort of, my constituents, salt of the earth, grow the economy, are extremely important and are misunderstood by the federal government. So I think if you're going to go in-house like I am, you have to really like the industry. Otherwise, it's the only industry, the only sector you're dealing with day in and day out. If you're not sure, go consult for a bit.
Yeah. Another question here from Devin. What about U.S. lobby groups flooding Ottawa? Do you see much of that?
Not really. There's certainly interaction. We met with the U.S. Embassy here in Ottawa last week. U.S. groups do often write letters, to ministers in response to consultation. The clean fuel standard, being a good one. But I'd say that we work across border with those groups. If we have like-minded issues, like the invisible 49th parallel, right? Unfettered access of whether it's biofuels or crops, being delivered in bulk to elevators that go across the border. So I'd say that our style of advocacy in Canada is a lot different. In the U.S., having participated in a day there, it's a lot more like get everyone to go there to the capital. Canada's a bit more Westminster parliamentary style. Like it's a bit more, you're not quite as bullish about it. So U.S. influence, but I'd say Canadian influence when it comes to advocacy wins out, unless you're looking at it as U.S. companies that have Canadian lobbyists. Then that's a different sort of thing. But if you look at the top 100 lobbyists for Canada, yeah, there's a couple pharma groups sort of thing, but they're for the most part Canadians based here in Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary sort of thing.
Yeah, interesting. If you what are some of the differences? Like if you all of a sudden were working for the U.S. Canola Growers Association, how would the way you went about your day, would it be different? Is it different in DC than it is in Ottawa? You sort of alluded to that a little bit there.
Yeah, I spent some time in K Street, and which is kind of the big where a lot of lobbyists are based, and a lot of the restaurants you see in House of Cards or whatever.
Yeah.
whatever your view is, whether it's House of Cards or Veep, it's kind of your
scandal,
or kind of hilarity in the the U.S. is sort of the Wild West compared to Canada when it comes to advocacy. DC's is there's far less rules. There's more just blunt force money thrown at things. They have PACs, which are political affiliations where you funnel money to one particular cause or to candidates. In Canada, we've got very restrictive and I think good rules around funding. Whether it's campaign contributions. In the U.S., there are groups that have vested interest in getting this senator, the state senator, in because they are anti-red, they want to cut red tape. So I'd say it is the Wild West. We're much more. It is much more like I guess if you just look at the bicameral system in the U.S., the multi-party system in Canada, we're much more coalition building, much closer to how things would happen in the UK than it would in the US. Just a totally different system and a lot more checks on the powers and the ways that lobbyists influence. In Canada, certainly it's much more toned down.
So when you break down your time, if you compare how much time you spend with the current federal government versus, say, the Conservatives, the NDP, the Greens, how do you break that down?
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good point. It really changes the majority government, right? Majority government, it's sort of you want to keep whoever's the official opposition in the loop, sort of thing. In this, it's really by seat count. So Liberals are the government of the day; they have the most seats, so most of our time goes to them. Conservatives have the second most seats. NDP and Bloc are similar, but the Bloc obviously not a lot of canola grown in Quebec. So, and I think you also end up spending time where, based on the individuals, like Alistair McGregor, the NDP's agriculture critic, is a great guy. So very easy to work and collaborate with. Leanne Roux now, with the Conservatives, very easy to work with. Minister Bebo's staff, the staff are easy to work with. So, but you do break up your time, and it depends on where your file is, right? Like if you look at a regulation, who do you want to influence the outcomes of regulation? You can take it to opposition parties, but opposition parties' job is to oppose. You take it to government and say, hey, government MP, can you go talk to your department about this issue? It's a government MP to their department. It is different. So, no rule of thumb, no percentage of time, but you spend more time with the government of the day than any other party.
We've been talking to Dave Carey. He is VP of Government and Industry Relations with the CCGA, and he was just named by the Hill Times one of Canada's top 100 lobbyists. Dave, thanks a lot for joining us here today, and once again, congratulations on being pointed out by the Hill Times.
Thanks, Shaun, and again, congratulations on top 50 in ag.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it very, very much.
Good ag day.
Yeah, you too, man. Okay, everybody, I really appreciate you tuning in today. Really awesome discussion. I find this so fascinating. This is important work that's happening behind the scenes. We don't see it at the farm level because we got other things to worry about. But Dave is one of those people that is working in the best interests of growers and producers across this country every single day when it comes to Ottawa. So I really appreciate him kind of pulling back the curtain and talking to us about the life as an agricultural lobbyist here today on the show. Hey, don't forget to tune in to RealAg Radio on Rural Radio 147 today at 4:30 Eastern. We've got Federal Agriculture Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau be with us, and we're going to talk about the carbon tax, BRM reform, and celebrate Canada's Ag Day as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Live. Have yourselves a great day. Cheers, everybody.